Live.
Namaskar. Good morning to all of you present here. A warm welcome to you on behalf of Disha Bharat. I, Bhavna Kashyap, consider it my privilege to welcome all of you to the second event of VIKASANA NEP 2020 Vision to Action. It's my privilege again to welcome our esteemed speakers, Dr. Jagadeesh Kumar, Dr. Mahadevan, and all our academic participants, accomplished participants who are here from all across India. To this online webinar, Vikasana. Disha Bharat is a non-profit social initiative that was started in the year 2005 to provide value education to students, parents, and teachers at high school and college levels. Activity-based workshop that Disha Bharat organizes is based on the theme, Know Yourself, Know Your Country, and Know Your Culture. National Education Policy, or the NEP 2020, that was rolled out earlier this year by the Government of India, is a visionary policy with a rootedness in Indian culture and ethos. We at Disha Bharat feel very proud that we resonate the ethical moorings and pride in India and Indian knowledge system that the NEP 2020 talks about. Hence, Disha Bharat is organizing this national webinar series, Vikasana NEP 2020 Vision to Action, to understand the policy in greater depth, detail, and clarity. Speakers, we started this Vikasana program last month, and our speakers then deliberated on some of the topics regarding the NEP 2020. The vision of NEP 2020 was taken by Dr. M.K. Sridhar, role of teachers by Dr. Anil Sahasrabudhe, and the implementation in Karnataka by Dr. C.N. Ashwath Narayan. And also our Disha's founder secretary, Srimati Rekha Ramachandran, presented to all the viewers the roadmap for the role of Disha Bharat in this context of NEP 2020. This morning, the focus area will be restructuring of the higher educational institutions in accordance with the National Education Policy, or the NEP 2020. And also the inspirations that today's higher educational institutions that we can take from our ancient Indian universities. To introduce our first speaker, Dr. Jagadeesh Kumar, I would like to call upon Dr. Sushma Bhavle, a pillar of support for Disha Bharat, an eminent academician herself, the retired principal of Maharani Lakshmi Ammani College. Welcome to you, Sushma ma'am, and over to you.
Thank you, Bhavna. Very good morning to all participants of Vikasana 2020. I am truly honored to introduce to all of you an eminent academician, researcher, and an ardent teacher, Dr. M. Jagadeesh Kumar, Vice Chancellor, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, who is a distinguished speaker of today's first session on NEP 2020, Structure of Higher Education Institutions. Dr. M. Jagadeesh Kumar obtained his MS and PhD in Electrical Engineering from IIT Madras and postdoc from University of Waterloo, Canada, under a world-renowned researcher, Professor David J. Rulton. Presently, VC of JNU, he is also associated with IIT Delhi in many capacities in the areas of teaching and research in the field of nano-electronic devices, nanoscale device modeling and simulation, innovative device design, and power semiconductor devices. These are the areas in which he has published extensively in refereed journals and also authored books. Dr. Jagadeesh Kumar is editor, associate editor, or on the editorial board of many reputed international journals like Nature, IEEE Journal of the Electron Devices Society, USA, recent patents on nanotechnology, and many more. His passion for teaching has earned him the 2013 award for excellence in teaching in large classrooms from IIT Delhi. He has been awarded the 29th IETE Ramlal Wadhwa Gold Medal for distinguished contribution in the field of semiconductor device design and modeling, and the first ever Techno Mentor Award for playing a significant role as a mentor and researcher. Dr. Jagadeesh Kumar is the chairman of the governing body of National Council of Science Museums, Ministry of Culture, Government of India, and was a member of UGC for 3 years, 2016 to 2019. He was also member of TRAI, Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. He has held positions of chairman at different points of time of GATE, JAM, JEE, and many national level entrance examinations. A renowned national and international luminary, I have only given a glimpse of his academic achievements. I request Dr. M. Jagadeesh Kumar to deliver his address. Thank you.
Namaskar. I consider it a great honor to be part of this webinar and share some of my thoughts with the teachers, students, and other participants across the country. We all heard about the mouse trap. We used it, that little box with a spring-loaded door. Now, the reason why I am mentioning about mouse trap is that if you have a great idea and if you think that the world will accept it anyway, that's a myth. Often, when you look at the history of scientific innovations and technological breakthroughs, we find that great ideas are just ignored by people. They did not even interest the intended stakeholders. This is called the mouse trap myth. Why? You know, the typical mouse trap that we use in our homes, it was invented in 1899. Since then, more than 50,000 or 60,000 improved versions of the mouse trap were patented in USA alone. But still, none of us use those mouse traps, even though they are improved versions of the age-old mouse trap. And that is the reason why, you know, if somebody thinks that we have a great idea, a great policy, therefore people will appreciate it. It is called a mouse trap myth. What it means that if you have a great idea or a policy, you still have to do a lot of work to get people interested in it. We still need to go to people, discuss with them, and convince them about the usefulness of our idea or the policy. And this webinar is a perfect example of such an exercise. In this webinar and in this series of webinars that you are conducting, now we are discussing the national education policy to the stakeholders across the country, and we are trying to take the stakeholders into confidence so that they will appreciate and understand the importance of implementing the national education policy. We, of course, still see some intellectuals raising a criticism at the national education policy and its implementation and so on. We may think that these are great academicians or intellectuals, and they should have no problem at all in understanding the great benefits of NEP. But even such people can be blindfolded, and their criticism has often been proved wrong. You know, let me tell you why such a thing is a possibility, and it happened in the history of science and technology. All of you are familiar, at least the older generation of the audience, you are familiar with the Kodak camera. It was a very, very popular camera. In 1975, the young engineers of Kodak company, they went to the management and they said, we have a great idea of a digital camera. But the management simply ignored it. Who will use these digital cameras? Our Kodak cameras are so popular. But meanwhile, Sony, it unveiled the digital camera. And even then, Kodak did not pay any attention at all. And today, we use the digital cameras as we are talking through this webinar. In our computers, in our phones, the digital cameras are extensively used. And the Kodak is nowhere in the camera market. So I would like to underline the fact that unless we go to the stakeholders and explain to them the importance of the national education policy, it is going to be very difficult to implement the national education policy, because the stakeholders consist of students, parents, teachers, academic administrators, and the state governments and the central government. So there is a huge gamut of the stakeholders who need to appreciate the importance of the national education policy. Now, if you look at the entire life cycle, the education life cycle of the national education policy, very quickly, is that it starts with the foundation stage, the first 5 years of the child's education, and then you have the preparatory stage and the middle school education stage, and then you reach the secondary education, about 4 years, 4 years duration, 5, 3, 3, and 4 years duration. And then the student moves on to the undergraduate education, where the student spends either 3 years or 4 years. And you have the sixth cycle of the education policy, which is the post-graduation, with 1 or 2 years of duration. And then you enter the research stage. And that is where the student spends 3 to 4 years doing innovative and creative research. Now, the reason why I have mentioned about these cycles is that as part of this policy, I'm sure many of the speakers must have touched upon the school education and the middle stage education. What I would like to do is, because I come from the higher educational institutional background, I would like to focus a couple of points related to the higher education, research, and innovation. And you're talking about the structure of the educational institutes, because focusing on innovation and creativity is one of the important activities of the higher educational institutes. Now, let me look at the question of how innovation happens, how great ideas are invented. When we talk about making India one of the leading countries in the world in terms of technological innovations and scientific breakthroughs, it is very important that our students come out of the rote learning to becoming creative thinkers. Now, when we think about creativity and innovation, the question that comes in our mind is, how does innovation happen? What kind of educational institutional structures have to be created so that our students become great innovators and great creative thinkers? Now, if you look at the literature, the scientific research that is done on how research innovation happens, how creative thinking happens. Stephen Johnson's classic book on where good ideas come from comes to my mind. He very beautifully explains using interesting examples of how innovation and creativity takes place in the minds of the people. Now, in 1964, there was a book on the act of creation. It was written by Arthur Koestler. And he said that breakthrough ideas in science and art, they materialize in our minds. And he was a great believer. Koestler was a great believer of the theory that creative ideas emerge when different intellectual disciplines collide with each other. At a basic level, of course, all of us, we understand that ideas happen in our minds. But there is one more important component which aids the generation of the creative ideas, and that is the environment in which the collision of different intellectual disciplines are made possible. The living environments, the coffee table discussions, the office group discussions, the encounters in the corridors, or the encounters with each other in the conference spaces. There are, of course, several scientists who looked at how environment affects the creativity or innovation. The process of creativity is understood by some of these researchers by studying, for example, the biographies of great scientists, or by interviewing great scientists, how these creative ideas have come in their mind by having long discussions with them. But these are all based on memories of the scientists who were creative long ago in their creative period of life. It was only 1990, in the early 1990s, a psychologist from McGill University, Kevin Dunbar, he decided to see how environment contributes to a generation of creative ideas by actually observing the scientists working in their laboratories. So what he did, he set up 4 cameras he set up the cameras in 4 leading molecular biology labs and recorded the actions of the scientists while they are conducting their research. And then he had extensive interviews. And you will be surprised to know that this entire process brought out some very, very important information, because the whole exercise was like the Big Boss show on the Indian TV. It was more like a in vivo approach rather than an in vitro approach to understand the scientific cognition process. The most striking discovery of Dunbar's study was the physical location, the importance of the physical location where most of the breakthroughs actually occurred. You know, in a discipline like molecular biology, you may imagine a scientist wearing a white gown, wearing protective glasses, and looking through the microscope and working for hours, and suddenly come up with that breakthrough. But surprisingly, if you look at the history of science, you find that such eureka moments are really isolated. In fact, most important ideas, they invariably emerged during the lab group discussions, where the researchers sit together across a table, share their work with each other, and ideas flow from one project to the other project, and so on. Dunbar's findings tell us that the ground zero of innovation is not the microscope in the lab, but the discussion table at an informal meeting. You know, I just remember the invention of the charge coupled device. The charge coupled device, or the CCD, is a device which is used in all the cameras that we are using in your mobile phone and in the cameras that we are using in our computers and so on. This charge coupled device, the idea behind charge coupled device came between 2 scientists when they were discussing across a coffee table. And a Nobel Prize was given to the scientist who invented the charge coupled device, the CCD. So therefore, what I am trying to say is that research very clearly tells us that it is not the advanced technology or the equipment that is there in your lab, but it is the group of humans at the table discussing their ideas with each other. That is what leads to the most productive creative ideas. And such interactions will lead to ideas spilling from one project to the another and resulting in new combination of ideas and innovations. In fact, when people work alone in their own labs, the ideas can get trapped in their own biases. And that is what happens. That is the reason why it is important that we encourage and nurture collaborations among disciplines and collaborations among these scientists in order to become creative and in order to generate innovative ideas. You know, one of the things that we need to keep in our mind is that while we encourage to work across the multidisciplinary areas or interdisciplinary areas, it is also important to encourage local innovation and local creativity. Let me tell you the meaning of that. Among about 130 million children who are born every year, nearly about 4 million children, they die within the 4 weeks of their life. Of these deaths, 75% of the deaths happen within the first week of the birth, and 99% of these deaths happen in poor countries. The mortality rate of the just born babies who are born before the 9-month period in the mother's womb, they have very little survival rate. And we all know that the incubators are used to increase the survival rate of these stillborn babies. Do you know how the idea for such an incubator came? This is an interesting idea, and this is what we need to cultivate in our educational institutes. In late 19th century, sometime in 1870s, there was a doctor in a Paris hospital, and he was so tired because of his work, he wanted to take a little break. He went to the nearby Paris Zoo and he walked around. He passed by the elephants, he passed by the tigers and the reptiles. And then he stumbled upon an exhibit of a chicken incubator. And this is a small box, and there is a warmth created through heaters inside these incubators. And the hatchlings were happily moving around inside this incubator, whose environment is controlled and warm. And, by modern standards in 19th century, the mortality rate was very, very, the infant mortality rate was staggeringly very, very high in 19th century. Every 5th baby who was born was simply dying because of the stillborn condition. So when this doctor looked at these hatchlings happily moving around, suddenly an idea struck in his mind. He asked the zookeeper and asked him, can you build a similar system of this size, of these dimensions? And he got some of these incubators made by the zoo keeper, and then he installed it in the hospital. And he showed that when you use this controlled warmth of the incubator, as compared to the babies who were dying at 68% without an incubator, he demonstrated that the use of the incubator resulted in only 38% of the prematurely born babies dying. And the entire Paris health establishment was shocked by this new innovation. And so that is how new innovations come. When you go out of your own silo, when you look at the other areas of research and innovation that is happening, new ideas emerge. One of the things that all of you as teachers are familiar with is the periodic table. Mendeleev, when he was trying to put these elements in a periodic table, he has a great difficulty. So one day, when he was sitting for his lunch break, there was another professor from the Department of Languages. Mendeleev is a Soviet scientist. So this happened in Soviet Russia. So this other colleague happened to be a Sanskrit professor. And they were discussing about how the Sanskrit alphabets are arranged in a two-dimensional array using a particular way based on the sounds, how the sounds are produced in our vocal cords, and how the sound comes out of our mouth. Based on that, the alphabets, the Sanskrit alphabets, are arranged in a two-dimensional array. And Mendeleev got very much interested in this, and using this idea, he tried putting these elements in a particular order, and that is how we have the periodic table of the elements. So the point I am trying to underline here is that it is very, very important to encourage our students to look at subjects beyond their own domain when they are studying in the universities or in the school system. But now, let me come to the other point of encouraging the local innovation and local creativity. You know, today you have so many aid plans to United Nations. United Nations sends lots of these incubators to poor countries to improve the mortality rate, the survival rate of the stillborn kids. Now, the modern incubator may cost, because it has extra facilities like oxygen, sensors, and so on, it may cost as high as 40,000 US dollars. Now, when these incubators are sent to these poor countries, it was found that most of these incubators will become non-functional. Nearly 95% of them will become non-functional within about 5 years or so. And an MIT professor found that, well, this happens because when these advanced equipment go to these poor countries, there are 2 points that we need to keep in our mind. One is, when the instrument breaks down, the spare parts are not available. And 2, there is no technical expertise that is available in that local area to repair this advanced incubator. So this MIT professor thought that can something be done about it? When he made a survey of the places where these incubators were supplied in these countries, he found that in those rural areas, in those village areas, there were a lot of automobiles that were moving around without any problem. You have the tractors, you have the lorries, you have two-wheelers, you have three-wheelers. And if they break down, there is a local expertise which can repair these automobiles. And suddenly an idea struck to him that why not we make these incubators using the supply parts of these automobiles which are available freely, very easily in those regions. And then he built the incubators using sealed headlights of automobiles for the warmth that is required in the incubator. And he used the dashboard fans of the vehicles for air circulation in the incubator. And he used the batteries of the lorries to power up these incubators. And he found that in a couple of years, these incubators could be very easily used there, because if something broke down, you can pull out the headlight of some other unused vehicle and replace the light here for the warmth. Or if something broke down, the mechanics who are repairing the automobiles can actually repair this incubator too. So you see that it is not only important to be innovative and creative in developing advanced technology, it is also important to encourage the local innovation and local creativity. We cannot simply pass it off as jugaad or some kind of non-technical, non-scientific work. So a combination of encouraging excellence in the higher educational institutes and then encouraging the local expertise and local creativity is also very, very important. And that is the reason why, you know, one of the calls given by our Prime Minister to make our country Atmanirbhar Bharat, or self-reliant India, that cannot be realized by simply relying on advanced technologies that we develop from the other countries. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, we have very clearly seen that if we depend on such supply chains, global supply chains, how much we become dependent on the whims and fancies of the other countries. And that is the reason why it is important that we develop local technologies. We encourage local innovations among our students who will come out of these educational institutes and become technologists and scientists. having said that, let me also highlight one more point that I would like to bring to your notice. This is about the emphasis on the local language or the mother tongue in the national education policy. I would like to spend a couple of minutes discussing on this while we are talking about creativity and innovation. One of the reasons why the national education policy says that we need to emphasize on the local language or the mother tongue while imparting the basic education during the formative years of the child is that there is enough research now to show that when the kids are taught in their local language, they actually become much more creative. There was a scientist in Japan who is a researcher on how the brain functions and how the environment and the languages that we learn impact the brain functioning. And after years of research, he found that the kids who are educated in Japanese language and the Japanese kids who are educated in English language, he saw the difference between them. He found that the kids who are educated in Japanese language, they were able to construct complex sentences in Japanese language to express critical and important ideas, while the same Japanese kids who are educated in English language, they found it very, very difficult to communicate effectively their ideas. And there are several such examples where scientists have proved that the creativity and innovation in the kids is much higher as compared to those who study in a language other than their own mother tongue. Mahatma Gandhi was a great supporter of education in the native language or in the mother tongue. He once said, while writing in Young India in 1929, that we are making our kids foreigners in our own country by teaching them in a foreign language. He was very, very emphatic that don't wait for textbooks to be printed, don't wait for syllabus to be created in the local languages. You go ahead and implement, the rest of the things will follow. He was so vehemently for imparting the education to our children in our local language. There are, of course, some critics who say that when children are not educated in English, they lose out on economic opportunities. There are some critics who say that the children who come from the socially and economically deprived sections of the society, they will be affected if they are not taught in English. On the other hand, research very clearly shows that teaching in their own mother tongue will make them much more creative than teaching in a foreign language. And it is very important that the kids who come from the socially and economically weaker sections, they are educated in such a way that they become more creative and innovative. Because if we want to have an inclusive development in our country, it is important that every section of the society, irrespective of from which social or economic background they come from, they actively participate in the cultural, social, and economic development of our country. So this is something that we need to keep in our mind. There is also a talk, a discussion going on in IITs. The Minister of Education recently also mentioned during his talks that in the next couple of years or so, we will be discussing on how to impart even the technical education in the local language. There are, of course, going to be practical difficulties in implementing this. We need to go in stages, but then it is in our hands to design the education in such a way that even the technical education can be imparted in the local languages. If you look at the top 10 countries in the world with the largest number of Nobel Prizes in those countries, you will find that in those countries, the children study in their mother tongue, not just only in the school education level, but even up to the higher education. And if you look at the bottom of the bottom 10 countries on the GDP ladder, it is those countries which have not economically developed, which have switched after the colonial masters left from their countries. They switched from their mother tongue to English, and you see that they are at the bottom 10 of the GDP ladder. So it goes without saying, and I firmly believe about the importance of imparting the education at every level in the mother tongue or the local language. Having said that, the national education policy is very clear that the national education policy is not compulsory to implement. Right? It is a great policy. There are great ideas embedded in that, because education is it's part of the concurrent list. Both the state governments as well as the central governments, they have to work together in order to implement the national education policy. I have I have a great belief in the fact that in the next few years or so, if the national education policy is implemented properly, it is going to transform our education and make India a knowledge society, just as it was, hundreds of thousands of years ago, where India was considered to be a Vishwa Guru. People flocked to India. They studied in our great universities here in a multidisciplinary, in a holistic environment. And I think we have a great opportunity today to take our country, to make our country once more a Vishwa Guru by implementing the national education policy across the country. But some of the critics say that the implementation of the national education policy requires huge funds. But if you carefully read the national education policy, there are several aspects of the national education policy which can be implemented by simply changing our own mindset, by simply changing our own attitude. For example, changing the environment in the classroom where the student becomes a great learner. It doesn't require any funding. You can use the existing classroom infrastructure. You can interact, you can design your educational instructional policies in such a way that the student becomes a good learner. Adi Shankara, he told long ago that if a student has to become a good learner, there are 4 things that needs to be created in the classroom environment. He said, Patanam, Mananam, Chintanam, and Sankirtanam. You need to study, Patanam, Mananam, you need to remember what you study, and Chintanam, you need to critically think, and Sankirtanam, you need to repeat the whole process. As teachers, we need to create this environment in the classroom and outside the classroom so that the students are constantly engaged in Patanam, Mananam, Chintanam, and Sankirtanam. Similarly, if you want to train your teachers in good instructional approaches, it is in our hands as academic administrators, as heads of the universities. It is important that we take the first step instead of waiting for the government to nudge us, you do this, you do that. I think as educational administrators, we need to take the first step and implement those components of the national education policy which require only attitudinal change rather than waiting for somebody to nudge. Just to give you one example, one of the programs that we have started in JNU is a 5-year integrated BSc MSc program. And this program focuses on Ayurveda biology. Now, Ayurveda is the indigenous knowledge of India, and biology is a modern science. And this program will be conducted by teachers, the professors from the School of Sanskrit and Indic Studies who are experts in Sanskrit, because a lot of this knowledge is stored in Sanskrit and other the languages of India, such as Tamil and other languages. And then the professors from life sciences and biotechnology and molecular medicine, they will work together across the domains, across the interdisciplinary knowledge. They work together and carry out research in this area. And one more example that I would like to mention to the audience is, even before the national education policy was announced 3 years ago in JNU, we conceptualized a dual degree engineering program where the first 4 years the students study the core engineering, such as computer science or electrical engineering or civil engineering. And in 5th year, they focus on studying social sciences, humanities, languages to obtain their master's degree. Imagine a student who's studying computer science in his BTech, and he opts for computational linguistics in his master's as part of his studies. Imagine a civil engineering student who completes his 4-year engineering degree, and then in 5th year, he opts for regional development, or he opts for social medicine and public health. So this combination of knowledge across the disciplines is what will make an engineer a scientist with social awareness, so that they understand how the technologies and the scientific breakthroughs that they are carrying out will impact the society. So this kind of bridging across the disciplines is very, very important in higher educational institutes. The path is open to us. The road is there for us to traverse across this road and transform the education in our country. As teachers, many of you are professors in this audience, many of you are academic administrators in this audience. We should consider ourselves fortunate and to be in the teaching profession, to be in a position to transform our educational system in our country. I think time has come not to let loose this golden opportunity. Time has come for all of us to work together and transform our educational system, so that our country becomes a self-reliant country, Atmanirbhar Bharat and Vishwa Guru once more. So with those comments, I would like to conclude here, and I would like to thank you for giving this opportunity to share some of the thoughts with you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. It was indeed our pleasure to listen to you. A lot of data and examples from various facets of education and human history has been given to say how innovation is possible, even in education, and with a strong grounding in our own values, our own culture and language. Thank you so much for this talk, sir. With your permission, would you like to take some questions?
Sure. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this question is from Ms. Sonam Bhutia, Government College of Pharmacy in Sikkim, and she wants to know, since this was not, she wants to know if there is a provision for entry within different courses in the colleges, and she said if this flexibility may lead to the loss of focus and less significance for a particular course. Sir, your thoughts on this, please.
Right. You see, in IIT system, we introduced several years ago, about 10 years ago, a system known as minor area specialization.
Okay.
It could be a civil engineering student, but she wants to study electrical engineering, and they can pick up some courses in order to complete this minor requirement. So this is a cross-disciplinary education. But obviously, when the students want to choose any of such areas, they will have questions, they will have doubts. So we evolved a system of mentorship. So you will have mentoring teachers who will guide these students depending on the interest of the student, depending on what they would like to do in their future. The mentor will advise, and together they will decide what is that they want to do. And in the new education policy also, there is a kind of mentoring system, and the educational institutes can evolve this mentoring system and guide the students. You're not getting into a wild forest just because it is wide open. You can still be focused and have carefully chosen choices so that you achieve what you want to achieve in your life in future.
Okay, thank you so much for that answer, sir. We received multiple questions from many of them saying, how do we maintain specialization and also be multidisciplinary, especially at the post-graduation and higher levels?
Right. You see, much of our, I'm giving engineering education as an example because I come from IIT. You know, much of our engineering education is based on science. And we teach our students, let's say a student has joined in textile technology for the undergraduate education. But we still teach that student maths, physics, chemistry, basics of electrical engineering, basics of workshop, computer science, and so on, so that the student doesn't become specialized at the undergraduate level. But as you move up in your education, when you move to the master's degree, or when you move to the PhD degree, that is when specialization happens. But even if you are doing a very specialized work at a later stage, it is important that you have a very broad background education at your undergraduate level. And what the national education policy has done is it has in fact made it even much more broader now in the new education policy. How? You see, earlier I could have chosen the courses only in IIT if I am a student at IIT. But today I have a possibility that I can actually register for online courses from some other institute, and I can accumulate those credits and use it as part of my education. So the freedom and the opportunity that is available to the students to have a broad-based training at the undergraduate level is enormous in the new education policy. But having said that, it is important for the students to choose these choices carefully. It is important that they discuss with their teachers in deciding what courses that they are planning to do. So that is the reason why I'm emphasizing about the creation of mentorship in the universities or the colleges is also very, very important. For a small group of students, a teacher should be assigned as a mentor so that that mentor will guide these students, and the student should not be just let loose that they will go and choose whatever they want without really knowing the implications of such a choice.
All right, sir. Thanks again for your answer. Sir, from our Zoom participants here, Dr. Binu, Archana ma'am, and Dr. Vimala BL ma'am, all of them have questions regarding the language, regional language as the choice of instruction. So how is it that in a metropolitan city or where there are so many dialects, so many languages being spoken, how do we give the instruction in a regional language or a native language where there are so many mother tongues? India is so diverse. So how do we tackle this problem? Your thoughts on that, sir, please.
So when we face with a challenge, there are two approaches. One approach is we magnify the challenge and say that it is unmanageable and there is no way we can find a solution to that. The other approach is to scale down the challenge and look at it in a focused way. Now, one of the arguments for imparting in the local language, one of the arguments against it is that there are so many people who are moving across the country, either because of transfers or because of the livelihood reasons and so on. But if you look at the data on the migration across the states, only 5% of the total population of India actually migrates across India. And now, within this also, there are different categories of migration. If somebody migrates from Madhya Pradesh to Rajasthan, it is obviously there's no problem. If somebody migrates from Chhattisgarh to Uttar Pradesh, there is obviously there is no problem. Yes, if somebody is migrating from Bihar to Bengaluru, there could be a problem. Now, just because of this difficulty associated with people who may be displaced from their original places, that it is difficult to impart in local language, that is one important aspect. We need to take care of that. But you need to look at the rest of the country. They are actually living in their own states and they are working in their own places. Imagine if I get my BTech degree in Tamil language, if I am employed in the automobile industry in Chennai, I will be interacting with the workers in Tamil because all the workers, the floor level workers, they speak Tamil. So therefore, there are some aspects of implementing the local language in the higher education. There are some aspects which are difficult to implement immediately, but there are other aspects that can be implemented. But here, this is where the technology will come to our rescue. There are so many speech, text to speech and speech to speech translators that are coming. This is an opportunity for our entrepreneurs to come up with apps which can translate from one language to the other language in real life, in real time, so that if you are speaking in Tamil, my device will simply convert that into, translate that into Telugu, and I understand it in Telugu. So we need to look at the technological solutions also.
All right, sir.
And by the way, I studied until 12th standard in Telugu medium, and it has never affected me in doing what I wanted to do in my later life. In fact, I feel that my concepts perhaps were much more clearer because I studied in Telugu medium.
Thank you very much, sir. Your answer just reinforced that you either choose to be a part of the problem or you choose to be a part of the solution. The choice is always ours. Thank you. Hopefully, we'll blend technology and our teaching instructions very well to create a viable learning environment for all our students. So, do we have time for a couple of other questions, sir? One more at least.
You are the boss. You can decide.
All right. So thank you very much. So here another participant, Mr. Ramakant Desai, sir, he has a question on to encourage innovation with vocational education. The innovation that makes a difference to daily lives of a lot of people, what is in the ground level. So how do we encourage that, and what does the national education policy, how does it provide for such an innovation to happen?
Right. If you look at the data shows that about 12 to 15% of the girls, they drop out of the school for family reasons, for marriage reasons, and so on. And if you look at the male students who drop out of the school, nearly 30% of them, they drop out because of the employment reasons, financial reasons. The fact is that not everybody can do a PhD. Not everybody wishes to become an engineer. There are more pressing needs in all of our lives. Maybe we want to take up a profession or a job and then support my family, my parents, my children. So it is important that there are different people want different things in their life. And vocational education is something that is very, very important, because if I'm somebody who wants to take up a job, I can't really go to the a university and study for years on to get a job. Vocational training has to be important. Today, we give a kind of second-class treatment to vocational education. On the other hand, if you look at what contributes to our GDP, nearly more than 50% of our GDP is contributed through services. And it is in the services that is where you have the welders, that is where you have the drivers, and that is where you have people who participate in the construction work, road making, the carpenters, and so on. It is a services which is contributing to our GDP. And the people who work in these services, they are hardly trained in a professional way. And if you can train them in a professional way, their output will be better, their job prospects will be better. And that is the reason why the national education policy has given greater emphasis on vocational training. If you look at advanced countries like South Korea or Germany, a lot of students actually opt vocational education because the job opportunities for them are as good as those who study in the universities. So therefore, this is also another point that I often emphasize, that one reason why we give second class status to the vocational education in our country is because the top higher educational institutes, they never came forward to take up the vocational education also as one of their activities. I think time has come for universities like top central universities like JNU or IITs and the other institutes to come forward and start vocational programs in their campuses, so that vocational programs are given the same importance as any other program given by these top institutes. And that is one way of raising the prestige and the image associated with vocational training. And also the quality of vocational training will vastly improve when the top institutes themselves take serious interest in imparting vocational training.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. I think it's time, like you said, time has come for giving an equitable education to everybody. And like how our Bharat of the
Bhavana,
olden
shall I
days
have?
had a dignity of labor, no matter who it was treated with an equal respect. I think we'll take that point home, and thank you so much for your comments, sir, and your time. With this, I think we'll move on to the next session, sir. Thank you very much. It was wonderful listening to Dr. Jagadeesh Kumar. He has been an inspiration. I hope all of our participants will take home a lot of messages that sir has shared over the last 1 hour. Over to Sushma ma'am for the introduction of our next speaker, Dr. Mahadevan, sir. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Bhavna. I'm indeed privileged to introduce Dr. B. Mahadevan, the distinguished speaker for the next session, NEP 2020, Inspirations from Ancient Indian Universities. Dr. Mahadevan's credentials as an academician with scholarly achievements in varied fields will make each one of us bow to him in reverence. Presently, Professor of Operations Management at the Institute of Management, Bangalore, he was also the founding Vice Chancellor of Chinmaya Vishwavidyapith, a university for Sanskrit and Indic knowledge. He has served on various prominent positions at IIT Delhi, XLRI Jamshedpur, and IIM Bangalore. He has been chief editor of the IIMB journal, Management Review, and served on the International Advisory Board of California Management Review. Besides being on the advisory boards of several business schools and management journals in India, Professor Mahadevan has published several of his research findings in leading international journals. One of his best-selling books, Management Paradigms from Bhagavad Gita and Other Ancient Indian Scriptures, indicates his scholarly proficiency in Sanskrit along with production management. Professor Mahadevan has been recognized for his excellence in teaching both at IIM Bangalore and outside. He was one among the 40 nominated globally for the Economic Intelligence Unit's Business Professor of the Year Award 2012. Professor Mahadevan is in one of his assignments at IIMB was responsible for creating new generation of academic programs in the higher education space that seamlessly blends ancient Indian knowledge traditions with contemporary knowledge systems. I request Dr. Mahadevan, who is also the guiding council member, Disha Bharat, who has contributed immensely in finalizing the modules for VIKASANA 2020, to kindly take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhavana ji, and it's my pleasure to be with all of you. Let me thank Disha Bharat for this opportunity. It was indeed a pleasure to listen to Professor Jagadeesh Kumar. I think a lot of points which I had, he echoed in what he said. It was really a pleasure. I have been asked to talk about inspirations from ancient Indian universities. I've been thinking about it for a while, ever since Rekha ji asked me that I should speak on this. Before we get into the ancient Indian university system, I would call it as education system than university system. I will tell you why I call it as an education system than a university system a little later. I think it's important that we keep in mind a few distinctive things about today's education system. Let me first, these are the placeholders for us before we start our discussion. Of course, these are my views. I've been thinking about it for a while. The first thing is today's education system is an epitome of extreme levels of specialization. Fairly from early stages of education, there is too much of specialization that is happening. And because of this, in the higher education space, what we see today is there is too much of compartmentalization. I'll give you an example. If you come to IIM Bangalore and take an MBA degree, you are supposed to earn 100 credits. And all the 100 credits will be on management. Whatever you do, it's all about finance, it's all about productivity. As though, life has only that as part of education. There's nothing else. A chemistry major will have to do only 140 credits of a honors degree of chemistry is 140 credits of chemistry. Or so that is what a physics graduate will do, and so on. I'm just telling you that for some reason we have created nice tight compartments in which, of course, we may give very good inputs. I'm not talking about that part of the story. This is the second part of the story which follows from the first. The third thing, which I do not know how many of you, in fact, Professor Jagadeesh alluded to many of these. I'm only sort of, putting them together in some ways. The third thing is the current education system, I'm afraid, has very little to address the passion of an individual. Are you telling me none of us have any passion? In fact, I must give you a very interesting example. One day I went to one of my relatives' house. It was about 8:39 in the night. There was a 9 feet by 6 feet painting of Sharada. Is going on. It is a young boy, a young person at the age of 27, 26, he is doing the painting. At 9 o'clock, 9:30, he left. After he left, I asked my relative, who is this gentleman? My relative smiled at me and said, he's a software engineer in Infosys. This is the 4 months work. He comes at about 6:30. 6:30 to 9:30, he does the painting and goes home. In fact, today, if you go to Sringeri Mutt, you will see those paintings. They're all mounted there. So are you telling none of us have any passion and we don't have to know that we have some passion, which is very individual? Should it not be nurtured? Should it not be even brought out? Is it not the job of an education system? Is there a room and a space for it? Today's education system certainly does not seem to have any sort of opportunity for this. And the fourth point, which I want to share with you, is today's education system, the way we have developed it in the last 60, 70 years, maybe 200 years, if you were, has very little room for received wisdom. This 2000-year-old legacy has been first thrown into a gutter. Looks like we don't need it. If at all anything, you can talk ill of it. Looks like, we have developed that kind of a certain mental model. So we are not connected to the past achievements in any ways, maybe by choice, maybe by design, whatever it is. But that's how the education space is today. So our received wisdom is not, there is no continuity to our received wisdom, is all that I'm making. And the last point I would like to make about today's education system is there are 4 compartments to every one of us. The 4 compartments are, we are a part of a society. That's one compartment for us. This is for every one of us. Doesn't matter what job we take, where do we go, and what do we do in our life, and so on. There are 4 compartments. There's a first compartment called society, second compartment called family, third compartment called profession, and a fourth compartment called my own individual space. Every one of us have it. Now, in today's education, the three compartments are out. It's only the professional compartment which is taken care. The rest are all either assumed away or implicitly assumed that it will happen elsewhere and so on. So the point I'm making, all that I'm trying to make is the education that we have is a small piece of a larger cake that we need for us as an individual. This is the take on an ancient educational system. I'll come to it a little later. All that I'm saying is these are some broad characteristics of how we have put together our educational system today. And of course, we have traveled well and we have done what we need to do in all those. That's not the issue, but I'm only saying that these kinds of issues do exist. Now, keeping that at one side, and as you have heard Professor Jagadeesh Kumar, and some of you would have also read the NEP, what you would realize is, in some sense, NEP is trying to address some of these fault lines. Is there a way we can sort of look at it and create some more mechanisms by which what you see here, what I was alluding to, can we address it a little bit? Can we do something about it? I think that's the broad pitch of NEP. I think if you understand that spirit of NEP, I think we will embrace it with full conviction. I mean, as Professor Jagadeesh was saying, there are a lot of issues on how do you implement it, how do you go about it. All that is there. That is there for anything that you bring. But the broad canvas on which it is painted, at least to me, appears quite an interesting proposition for us to explore and create that nice painting of education for us. Anyway, keeping that aside, now let's talk about ancient educational system. Now, if you really want to get a very good sense of ancient education system, I would personally recommend you to read a book written by Professor Radha Kumar Mukherjee in 1903. He came to Mysore. He was there in Mysore University for a few years and wrote some beautiful books. One of them is Ancient Indian Education System. It's a very thick, about 600 pages, beautiful book. To give you a very good sense of what really was happening in the ancient educational system. Fairly well researched, well quoted, and well written book. If any of you are interested, you must look at it. Motilal Banardas will have a copy. You should be able to look at it. Anyway, so if you look at that, ancient education system is not university. We keep all the time saying Nalanda University, and so on, which is very true. But ancient education system, there are two models. Two dominant models. One model is what is called a cluster of schools, gurukuls, if you wish to call, and there were thousands of them, not just one or two of them. There are a large number of gurukuls, which typically had even as high as 100-150 students in a gurukul, which is a crowd which keeps on. It's a floating crowd. At any point it can be even 150, 200 sort of a thing, which always have a kulapati sort of a thing, a guru or a rishi or somebody who actually runs it. And you have a large number of such things scattered all over the geographical spread of the country. This is one model. And the second model is a bigger centralized system. And, Nalanda, for example, actually Buddhists promoted that in a big way. The second model, I think in all fairness, many of them were promoted by the Buddhists, but they imbibed a lot of spirit of how the education was running in the other model and put all of them into this. So we have two systems in the ancient educational infrastructure, a large number of gurukuls. Now the question is, people today argue that if you have a centralized system, there are a lot of advantages. Absolutely. You have scale, you have a lot of people who can come in. There is a great deal of meeting of minds that can happen. There is a great deal of discussion. There is a possibility of more innovation, and all that is there. Now, was it missing in the other model? Absolutely not. Because the other model, which is thousands of these gurukulas, they had a very beautiful mechanism of networking. These clusters are so beautifully networked, and they were meeting, periodically. Parishads were there. Annual parishads were very important. Then you had sort of conferences, even the royal patronage, which brought all these rishis to one place. So I think both the models made eminent sense. We need actually both of them. I don't think, unlike the current Western thinking, you create a large systems of a few of them and then crowd everything into one place. That is the broad highway on which we are traveling. But I think both are very important. You should have clusters of hundreds of such schools which very beautifully networked. There's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of meeting of minds. There's a lot of formal, informal, in so many ways. Anyway, so all these were happening, and annual parishads were very, very important. Great ideas were moved only through the parishads. And then there were also structured mechanisms, great yajnas were done where all these people, it's like a conference now, where all these rishis and these Gurukula students will get together and meet, and you have Vakyarthas and those kinds of, it's a different set of mechanism. And the centralized university system brought the other advantage, where we had a large scale number of intellectuals coming together, large number of students coming together, so one can invest on huge universities and so on and so forth. So these were the two components of the education system that we were aware of, and both of them shared very similar things in terms of how the education, about which I will talk. But all that I would say is both of them structurally looked a little different, but in terms of spirit of how they went about the education, what they did in the name of education, pedagogy, were sort of almost same or similar. Okay. Now, to give a little sort of idea on what was happening in university, can you mute some people are unmuted? Can you please? Yeah.
Yes.
So I think if you look at
Sir, you're on mute. Mahadevan sir, you're on mute.
yes, I have unmuted. Thank you. Okay. So about 15 universities one can think of, the bigger universities. And chronologically speaking, Takshashila was the earliest of all these, which was in the before Christ, BCE, 6th century BCE to it went up to 5th century CE, about 1000 years, Takshashila. Then chronologically speaking, it was Nalanda. Nalanda was from 5th century AD to 12th century AD. In fact, 12th century AD, all universities were destroyed. Most of them were destroyed. In fact, 3 universities within a radius of about 400 kilometers were destroyed in the area of Bihar, which are, Nalanda. Then you had, I think, Vikramashila, and one in Bengal, one in Bangladesh. All of them were destroyed by the same set of invading Turkish, leaders and so on. So you have Vikramshila, which again was from 8th century AD to 12th century AD. You have Vallabhi in Gujarat, again 6th century AD to 12th century AD. It was again destroyed. And destroyed in the sense, when it was looted, when the royal patronage went away, then see, this is what we should understand. If you create something big, then investments are bigger, maintenance of them is bigger, you need more money, you need more resources. Moment the patronage went out, the royal patronage went out because the kings were chased away. We had different kind of rulers who came in, who had a different sort of understanding of what they should do. We had no respect for any of these and so on. So all these eroded, so systems got destroyed. In fact, there was Kantalur University in Kerala, down south. Even that by 13th century AD, 10th through 13th, I think 1000 AD to 1300 AD, that was also sort of run down to nothing. Now, it is very interesting. I am actually in the process of writing a book on Indian knowledge systems. And in the last about 8 months, I must have read about some 8,000 pages of Indian knowledge systems. There is something which was very striking to me, and I was wondering why it was happening. I was able to connect to this when I was preparing for this talk. What has happened is Indians created superior knowledge by and large up to 14th century. After that, it started dramatically tapering down. In fact, the golden period of knowledge creation was 3rd century BC to something like 11th century, 12th century AD. And that you are able to now understand because we had these university systems, these clusters of these gurukuls were all well patronized. They were all operating very well and so on. So anyway, so these were the kind of educational system. About 15 universities, as I told you, which are all after 1200, we don't see any of them. We are now excavating the ruins and trying to find out how many buildings were there and how many bricks were there and those kinds of things we are doing. But they are all gone. And this invading army also burnt the manuscripts. And apparently, you know, some 6-8 million manuscripts were burning for about 2-3 months and so on. And with such a great catastrophe assaulted on a society, it is bound to have a discontinuity in terms of our knowledge creation and received wisdom and so on. But looks like this country has managed it till 1800 so well with whatever remaining we had, and then got into another sort of a problem. Anyway, all those are part of the larger discussion on education. Now, all these, as I told you, existed up to 12th century AD. After that, it has generally tapered and has become here and there a few of them. Nagarjuna University in Andhra again for about 300-400 years it was there, and after that it's also gone and so on. In fact, it attracted a large number of students and many international travelers, 10,000, 12,000 students very easily, and most of them were residential universities. In fact, there is a nice message here. If you want a very high level of research and a very high level of education and intensive thinking that has to happen, residential requirement is very important. That's why either it should be a Gurukula or a residential university. This day scholar business does not create great knowledge. It can disseminate knowledge. You need both of them. I'm saying you need to have all the models with us. I'm only bringing that from this pattern that I see there. And what I also noticed is there was a great deal of general instruction. There's a great emphasis on making education as generalized as possible. And those generalized things, for example, Chaturdasha Vidyasthana is one framework. The entire body of knowledge which need to be imparted were under 14 parts. Chaturdasha Vidyasthana. And so, you know, get them all on the same page in terms of a wide variety of knowledge. And then, you know, in the previous session, there were questions on specialization and so on. It looked as though the model is after you had this general level of specialization, you also had mechanisms for special, you know, very specialized skill upgradation. You know, if you look at what is called Shilpa Shastra, we have what is called Chatusashti Kala, 64 different kalas. Now, if you go through the list of the 64 different kalas, what you will find is our ancient education system had two sides of the coin. One side of the coin is you must be educated of a knowledge base. You must acquire a certain knowledge base. So it was all sort of common in some ways. Then you have to make a living. At the end of the day, people have to make a living. That is the other side of the coin, which is Chatusashti Kala. So one can pick up skills. One can pay, there are 64 different types of kalas which are being mentioned. You know, it had engineering skills, it had a lot of skills on aesthetics, and it has a lot of intellectual skills. There are skills on gambling, skills on dressing, skills on, you name it. So what you see is these two are not mixed up. Everybody must be educated on some broad principles of a few things. Then, of course, everybody has to pick up useful skills for life, to make a living, to feel happy, to do what they want to do, and then keep a family and be happy about it. Those, by and large, came from Chatusashti Kala. And the second part is imported in a very sandwich mode. Vocational training is what we were talking today. It was a nice sandwich mode. There is theory and a practice, and there is understudy. It's a combination of all of that, which brings that nuances of those skills that somebody picks up. Quite often it may be going down from the father to the son and the near, you know, the other relatives around and so on. Those kind of thing was happening. So people were having two dimensions to education. So these are some of the sort of things that we see in the ancient educational system. As I told you, after 12th century, you notice that there is a sort of a degradation because royal patronage was missing, and therefore sustenance became a huge problem. Different set of people came to govern this part of the land, and so they had a different view of what needs to be done and so on. Anyway, let all that remain, and they're all history, and anyway, we are going through that part of the history. So I will now come to my main argument in terms of how do we get inspired by that education that was there, and is there anything that we can pick up from that? Are there any leaves for us to turn? So this is where I want to spend a little bit of time after setting the stage for all these. So let me take it in 3 dimensions in terms of what kind of inspirations can we look for from the ancient Indian educational system. The first dimension is in terms of institutional level. As a university, as a large, educational system, what ethos, what kind of culture and institutional norms that they were perhaps propagating. It's the first thing that we need to look at. I used to very jokingly say that you have the NIRF rankings now, you have the global rankings of universities and so on. So I used to very, in a lighter moment, I used to tell my students here at IIM Bangalore that if 2000 years back, if there was a ranking of universities, can you tell me a name of 1 or 2 universities which will be ranked? And then invariably they say Nalanda, Vikramshila, Takshashila, and things of that kind. So about 2000 years back, in fact, much of the invasion that happened in this country were all started only through the university route. You had, Chinese travelers, you had the Greek travelers, you had the Arabs who came in and then stepped into these universities, and then they found what was happening. They went back, they reported, and then that attracted the attention of the, the kings in the neighboring areas and so on. This is one way by which this country got open to the rest of the world in terms of invasions, right? So the question naturally, therefore, in front of us is how is it that they were really good? How is it that they were so sort of magnets of learning at that point in time? They were able to attract a huge number of people, including some of the foreign travelers and so on. So how did it happen? So I have been thinking about it for a while. I used to deliver some lectures on that also, but for want of time, I want to make it quite concise today. According to me, there were 3 things that I find in the spirit at an institutional level that was transpiring in the name of the university system. The first thing is what I call it as thinking big. There was a common thread of promoting what is called thinking big. Now, how do you infer that? In fact, there are a number of ways by which we can infer how the educational system during ancient times heavily encouraged thinking big. I'll give you a couple of examples. Gautama Buddha was a prince of Kapilavastu. He got married to Yashodhara. So there is a biography of Buddha, Gautama Buddha, called Lalita Vistarana. If you look at that Lalita Vistarana, there is a description of the Swayamvara. How did the Swayamvara happen? And the Swayamvara apparently was the Yashodhara's father brought a sage by name Arjuna, and Arjuna actually quizzed Buddha on mathematics. In a way, it's a good luck for us. If they quiz us on mathematics, I don't know how many of us will get married. But anyway, this Arjuna was asking Buddha a bit of questions on mathematics, and he asked him to tell large numbers. So Gautama Buddha went up to 10 power 50, 10 power 53. Okay. And then that was called Tallakshana. So he went on telling numbers up to 10 power 53. Then he told Arjuna, sir, I will tell you, I will stop it here. I will tell you a number system. And that number system has a certain formula, 10 power 23 raised to the power 2 times some n, some formula is there, plus some 47 or 30, something like that. He says if you put n equal to 0, you will get 10 power 57. If you put n equal to, it goes by 10 power 53, then 10 power 99. It goes 23 levels, it will go. 23 into 46 levels, it will go. So he says at the 8th level of counting, there is a number called 10 power 421. And he gives names also. In fact, I've been writing a chapter on mathematics in my book, and I actually landed on all kinds of big numbers. There is a Jain canonical text in which there is a number 2 power 96. And that number is an approximate estimate of the number of human beings or living beings on the earth and so on. It was written in the 8th century BC. So we had this culture of thinking big, and otherwise, why would a number of 10 power 421? In fact, until I think a few years back, we needed only a number called 1.76 into 10 power 16. It's called 1,76 crores. That's all the number we needed. Because that big number is all needed to, size a corruption or something. Or, you needed a number called Avogadro number. And beyond that, we never wanted numbers. Whereas as early as 3,000 years back, we were talking about a structured system in which there is a 10 power 421 with which unique numbers. In fact, if you read Yuddha Kanda in Ramayana, and I think there is a 39th Sarga, in which there is a description of Rama's army, in which a very huge number, up to 10 power 61, you will find a set of numbers being reeled out there. Multiple references I can give. Now, if you look at Chandogya Upanishad, okay, and in the 6th Kanda of Chandogya Upanishad, the Rishi is telling the king. It is not the king telling the Rishi. The Rishi is telling the king, Nalpe Sukamasti Bhuma Vai Sukam. He says, there's no charm in small little things. Na Alpe Sukamasti Bhuma Vai Sukam. Yet, Bhuma Tat Amritam. He says, go after immortality. The Rishi is asking the king, go after immortality, go after big things. There's no charm in small little things. You will find a lot of passages like this. There's a lot of passages like this. I will go to one more from, Mundaka Upanishad, one of the very nice Upanishads. The starting part of Mundaka Upanishad is a conversation between Shaunaka, King Shaunaka, and his Angiras. So the question Shaunaka is asking, Kasmin Vijnate Sarvomitam Vijnatam Bhavati. Can you please tell me, sir, by knowing that I will be known of everything? So we never settled for, what do I do for tomorrow morning? How do I, make money in the next month? They were not the issues taught in universities. Universities inspired people to think big. And today in our management education, in strategy making, this is what we tell them. You have to think big. We are not able to give them how to think big, or what is the the inspiration to think big. If you get deep into all this literature, you actually find there are plenty of references. I just gave a few of them just to give you a sense of what I meant by saying that at an institutional level, universities were pushing its students and its teachers, whatever you may call it, is to make them think big. They were emphasizing it. There are many ways you can actually find it if you read the ancient scriptures and so on. Number system, as I told you, we can keep on seeing. This is one main point. Now, if you think big, the question is what will happen? Because universities and the centers of learning have to think big. If you think big, what will happen? Well, if we think big, it is inevitable that after some time we will get into a deep state of inquiry, because we will not be just daydreaming all the time. Thinking big is only a first step that will inspire us to go after some of those that we were thinking big. So if you find in the Indian educational system, there is again this push for a spirit of inquiry, spirit of deep inquiry. And I will talk a little bit about it in the teaching method. I'm not going to get into it in some details. At an institutional level, I'm saying that there is a spirit of inquiry. And what is the proof of the pudding? Proof of the pudding is the kind of knowledge that were created at that point in time. Today, we seem to be only talking about it, not knowing how it were all created. For example, you take just health. I was just actually writing a chapter. That's why this idea comes to my mind. I was just writing on health, wellness, and psychology just now on Indian, my book on IKS. Now, if you look at Charaka and Sushruta Samhita and ask what is the definition for health, it is astounding. It says, for example, Sushruta says, Samadosha Samagnischa Samadhatu Malakriyaha. That is the first line. Second line says, Prasanna Atma Indriya Manaha Swastaha iti abhidiyate. So there are two lines here. First line is purely physical aspects of health, because Samadosha, Pitta, Kapha, Vada, those are doshas. Samadosha, Sama Agni. The Jatar Agni, the digestive fire must be in balance. Samadosha, Sama Agnischa, Sama Dhatu. We have 7 dhatus. They are all should be in right proportion. The bone marrow, the platelets, we call whatever, all those, flesh and, this reproductive sap and all that. Samadhatu malakriyaha. Your digestive system, excretory system, everything must work well. That is line 1. What is interesting is the second line. Prasanna Atma Indriya Manaha. It says you can never be healthy if you are not having Prasanna Atma Indriya Manaha. Till 1948, in fact, till 1984, I must say, World Health Organization refused to include mind and mental processes for a definition of health. For them, health was all physical. That's the Western understanding. Whereas we said Prasanna Atma Indriya Manaha. And why did they agree in 1984? Simply because the 2 killer diseases, diabetes and hypertension, is all mind, not physical. They are all actually happening because of the mind, not because of physical condition. Stress and job burnout and all that we are talking about are all Prasanna Atma Indriya Mana is not there. This is the definition of Sushruta. Definition of Charaka is even simpler. It says, Swasmin Karmani, Swasmin Stane, Stiyate iti Swastyam. You be yourself. He said, you be yourself, you are healthy. The problem with many of us is we are not ourselves. We want to be like somebody else. We want to do that. We don't understand our inherent strengths. We don't understand where our strengths lie, but we want to do something else. This is where health starts. He says, Swasmin Karmani, Swasmin Stane, Stiyate iti Swastyam. Why I'm saying all this, if you look at, for example, Bhagavata Purana. Bhagavata Purana, in all Puranas, there are Panchalakshanas. Every Purana is not written casually. There are ways by which a Purana has to be written. They're all well codified. So one of them is called Sarga and Samsarga. We have to talk about the origin of the genealogy. We have to talk about origin of the universe. So it is done in the 3rd chapter, 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavata Purana. You'll find it in all Puranas, 18 Mahapuranas, you'll find it. So in that, there is one chapter, I think chapter 11, in the 3rd or chapter 9, I don't remember, where there is a description of, when you talk of origin of universe, time becomes important. We have to talk about time. So there is a description of time from 10 power minus 5 seconds to 10 power 17 human years in one chapter. So the central, all these definitions, if you have to talk about length, first you have to define something. You have to define a meter. Now there is a way to define a meter with how much time it takes for a light to travel and all that. That's a definition now for a meter. 1948, we have settled the velocity of light and all that. So you may define meter. Then you will say 1/10 of a meter is decimeter, 1/100th of a meter is centimeter, 1,000th of a meter is millimeter. On this side, you may say 1,000 meter is kilometer. You will go up to nanometer. On this side, you may go up to gigameter and all that. In the same way, there is one definition of time in chapter 3. It says, Dwadashartha palonmanam chaturbir chaturangalaihi swarnamashay krita chidram yavat prastha jalaplutam. It gives a nice experiment. You take a vessel of a certain weight, pierce a hole at the bottom of the vessel, put it on a water body, start the stop clock. The water starts, sipping through the hole at the bottom. So suddenly, yavat prastha jala plutam. When that jala becomes full, that vessel becomes full, stop the stop clock. Find that elapsed time, that is called nimisha. And then it goes on, connecting in so many nimisha is so much, so many nimisha is like this, and goes. These kind of knowledge that did not come just like that. You go and read Panini's Ashtadhyayi, you will find out it's a masterpiece. It's all deep inquiry. It's all a culture of, making our students think very deep. So that is the institutional ethos of ancient educational system. Let me come to the teaching method. That's the second part, which is very, very important. Now, there are 3-4 very distinctive aspects of teaching which I notice in ancient Indian educational systems. The first thing is our teaching is characterized by what is called Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. It is not, giving a lecture and that's it, or giving a, one lecture notes or one PPT slide or one book, which you have to just go through it and then get some marks. And I mean, we are doing it in a different way now. But the ancient teaching method, first of all, it says that Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana is the only way you will learn. There are no shortcuts. God is in details. There are no shortcuts possible at all. And in this whole process of Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasanam, the Guru plays a very important but a minimal role. Guru plays a very important role, but it is still minimal because he can only be a catalyst. A Guru, if you ask me what is the definition of a Guru at one level, he is just a catalyst. In chemistry, catalyst means it will only accelerate the process. It will not take part in the process. It will only speed up the process. So in the same way, the education that a student goes through is catalyzed by the Guru. And this mechanism of Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana is the platform on which the entire educational paradigm was mounted. Now, a fallout of that, essentially what it means is the students must have enough opportunity to work it out in their own mind. That is called Manana and Nididhyasana. They have to work it out in their own minds. Very deeply, they have to think through it. In fact, there are several passages I can quote. In Taittiriya Upanishad, you have the third, Brigoli. It's called Varuni, Bhargavi, Varuni, with their father and son. There are many father-son duels in teacher and student in our, scriptures we see. So Bhrigu went to Varuna and said, please tell me what is Brahman. He never gave an answer. Adihi Bhagavo Brahmheti. Please tell me what is this Brahman. For such a complex subject, this father teased his son by saying, Tapasa Brahma Vijijñāsasva Tapo Brahmheti. You go and do tapas, you will know Brahma. And there are 5 paragraphs you should read. Adihi Bhagavo Brahmheti Tagumho Vacha Tapasa Brahma Vijijñāsasva Tapo Brahmheti Satapo Tapyata Satapas Taptva Idagum Sarvam Asrijata. He did tapas and found. And then he came and said, Annam Brahmheti Vyajanat. Oh, I now understood. Annam is Brahman. Annadhyeva kalvimani bhutani jayante annena jatani jivanti. Oh, this is the reason. Then the father smiles at him and he says, sorry. Then the son again asks, Adihi Bhagavo Brahmheti. Then the father gives an answer, Tapasa Brahma Vijijñāsasva. Complex ideas are not answered. The father 5 times sent the son simply saying, Tapasa Brahma Vijijñāsasva. It is a deliberate methodology of teaching. See, today we say, these are all Western paradigms. We say you have to ask doubts. You have to ask questions. I will tell you my personal view is you should never ask questions. You should live with the doubt. You should ask the question to yourself. If you throw out the question, you disown the question. And then if a teacher has some answer, and I don't know what happens to it. You have to live with the question. The question may disappear. The question may transform into something else, or he may give an answer to you. These kind of methodologies were adopted. That is why we have a culture of Dakshinamurti. He says, Mauna Vyakya Prakatita Parabrahma Tattvam Yuvanam. By silence he taught. So we should not ridicule this. We have to understand this. That this whole idea painted in all these scriptural things that you read is that allow the students to work it out in his or her mind. that will stay with him for a long. That is how deep knowledge is created. That's how this real understanding happens. That's why Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana was a basic framework of education. Today, I do not know why we can't look at it. This is point number one. Point number two. So, they spoke very little. That's why Mauno Vyakya Prakritita Parabrahmatvam. So, teachers speak very little. They inspire the students to find out. But I can give examples from every Upanishad. I don't want to do it. It gets too longer. So, I will sort of leave it there. Now, they also brought very unrelated things as a reply to a question. And why did they do it? Gurus did that because they wanted to open up the understanding of the student of the problem at hand. What is this Brahman and where do I go? How do I evolve? There's a question in Mahanarayan Upanishad. So beautiful Upanishad, in which again there is a beautiful answer. The answer, it is called Prajapati Aruni Vidya. Again, there is a Prajapati and Aruna, father and son. So this Aruna goes and asks his father, tell me, how do people evolve? Then the father says, sun has to rise every day in the morning. This is the answer. So the son is completely perplexed by this answer. That passage you should read. I allowed to chant it, but I don't have time to chant it now. I won't do it. But what he says is sun has to come every day. If the sun comes every day, the climatic cycles will be very nice. You'll have rain. If you have rain, you'll have sasyas and vanaspati. If you have vanaspati and oshadi and all that, you'll have good food. If you have good food, you'll have nourishment. If you have nourishment, your brain will work. If your brain will work in a Shraddhaya, Manisha, Manishya, Medaya, like that, it keeps going on. You'll develop Meda Shakti, you will think through, you'll identify who you are, and then you'll evolve. So these are nice methodologies by which teaching and learning was an inspirational process, not a syllabus completion mechanism. See, today we are at a terrific pressure. I can understand both the administrators and the teachers. We are at a terrific pressure of competition, looking all the side around rather than looking at ourselves. The moment you took one step forward, you have to look at both sides and see what is happening to NIR of ranking. Unfortunately, that's the paradigm on which we have put ourselves into. While it helps up to a point, it doesn't help entirely. While we have to manage it, but we should not lose sight of the cardinal principles of teaching and learning is all that I would like to say. So these kinds of things. There was a great deal of importance of self-efforts clubbed with group efforts. You cannot learn anything alone. Professor Jagadeesh was alluding to meeting of minds and so on, even in a laboratory where you have all those complex solitude way of doing experiments. Now our ancestors said, Acharyat padam adatte, padam sishya somedeya, padam sa brahmacharibhya, padam kalakramena cha. So Acharyat padam, 25% teacher. Padam swamedeya, self-reflection, manana, nididhyasana, and so on. But to aid that process of manana and nididhyasana, padam sa brahmacharibhya. With other people, we have to sort of, discuss, exchange ideas, get into a certain kind of a discussion and so on. These were all part of the system. So this kind of trying to put self-efforts and have a group effort as an integral part of learning. So these are some of the aspects of teaching methodology. Then I end by only talking about the gurus. I was curiously sort of going through who is a guru, how do you define teachers? In our ancient system, was there a professor, associate professor, assistant professor, emeritus professor? What is the equivalent? I was just sort of trying to understand it for myself. I located some 8 terms. So I will, lay out these 8 terms. And I lay out in the order of complexity, in the order of increasing sophistication. Okay. The simplest thing is called Sikshaka. He does Sikshana. Simple, there is a lesson. You can take a book and read it. And hopefully, students understand it. So it is a basic starting, Sikshaka. Then you have what is called Adhyapaka. It's the next level, a little more of sophistication. Can you get them into a little more of the lessons and so on? Then Pradhyapaka, Praudadhyapaka, a little more ustad in that. I've learned the trick a little bit more. So these 3 are ladder 1 for me. If somebody aspires to be a teacher, this is the ladder 1. Do you know how to teach your syllabus? Can you teach it in a way that students are able to get the attention of the students? That is called Sikshaka, Adhyapaka, and Pradhyapaka. Then goes the second like a treadmill level 2, you can go to a second level of being a teacher. And that is Upadhyaya and Mahamahopadhyaya. You can bring interest in the students on the subject matter. Teaching a lesson and a syllabus is one part of the story. So you can teach lessons in chemistry, but at the end of teaching, if you can bring in them a deep sense of love in chemistry, they go on to become great chemists sometime later. Some teachers are very known for it. So Upadhyaya and Mahamahopadhyaya, even you can be a Ustad in that. So you have two more terms now, which is I call it as level 2. Then there is a level 3. I call it as Deshikottamaha and Acharya. These are all the terms used. Now, in level 3, what happens is, it is not about your subject matter. It is not about your ability to inspire students in the subject. It is your ability to inspire students by being a role model. Swayam achareti sishyam achinoti iti acharya. You practice and make the students practice in what you believe in. He's called an acharya. There's a nice definition for acharya. Swayam achinoti, acharya stapayati. All the students are put onto the same track. They look upon you for the values, and the teacher can graduate themselves to a great inspiring role model. That is the level 3. And then comes the final level called Guru. Panini, 2700 years back, gave a definition for Guru. He says Guru has Gakara and Rukara. He says Gakara hai Andakara hai, Rukara hai Tan Nirodha hai. So he says, what is Guru? He defined Guru as somebody who can bring light into your life, draw you out of darkness of life. I mean, that's a much bigger platform. It is not chemistry or physics or mathematics. It is not even being a role model and then giving him some useful values of life. It is bringing him to light, bringing him to, this whole possibility of feeling happy about a sense of fulfillment in life. A teacher can do it. So this is the third component I wanted to talk about ancient universities and education system. I would conclude here because I have taken a lot of time. I would only say by one quotation from Vishnu Purana, and that quotation says, Ya vidya sa vimuktaye. It says the goal of education is to liberate an individual. But unfortunately today, our educational system is Ya vidya sa niyuktaye. Can you get him a job somehow? Can you give him some skills which will get him a job? So I think the modern paradigm, for whatever reasons, have taken that position. Whereas Vishnu Purana says the goal of education, Vivekananda said that education is the art of man making. So the goal of education is to remove the andhakara and inspire them and get them to great levels of self-actualization. At the end of the day, I should have a good sleep every day. If you as a teacher has endowed that to me, I'll be eternally grateful to you forever in my lifetime. That's what we do. So can we work on that goal also, in addition to all our NARF rankings and all our, these are all competing. I'm not trying to, put it in a way that it's so simple. I also, couple of years try to run a university along the lines of many of these ideas. So there are challenges. I'm not saying there are no challenges, but because there are challenges, I don't think it is a good idea to abandon all these. There is a lot to inspire from. There's a lot to think through. And if there is a way we can imbibe some of that and dovetail into our system, we will be the winners at the end of the day. And the possibility of India becoming a Vishwa Guru will be very much at hand. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patient listening. I hand over the control back to Disha Bharat team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahadevan sir. It was indeed a pleasure listening to you. We are truly inspired by what you have told. I hope all of our participants are also feeling the same way. Sir, with your permission, a couple of questions, sir. Yes. So one of the questions we had was regarding, we have learned so much about our ancient Indian wisdom now. So what is that the teachers of today, how should they prepare to bring this wisdom into the current context? So your thoughts on this?
Very important question and a very serious question everybody is asking. I think there are two very important things. The first thing I want to say is, let us take one step at a time. And that step is not to talking about the glory of the ancient Indian wisdom. I think that it inspires no one except for these 1 hour sessions. That is not our idea. Our idea is to meaningfully draw from what we have. So therefore, I think nothing works better than if I as a teacher believe that ancient Indian wisdom truly has something to make a difference, I will bring it and put it in front of my students. It may be, I may be a teacher of chemistry, I may be a teacher of math, I may be a teacher of architecture or soil testing or whatever. Everything is available. If I can come back, do my homework, come back and show to my students, this is what I found in a field of architecture. There are two great works in the 11th century. There is Samarangana Sutradhara by King Boja and Yukti Kalpataru. Wonderful ideas. One can bring ideas from there. Nothing inspires. I mean, it should go like that. Every one of us must take a sankalpa that I will show the proof of the pudding in the eating. Let me show how great ideas are available and how we can make use of it. In small ways, it will grow like anything over a period of time. While that is what at the teacher level we have to do. Institutionally, we will do, we'll change the policy. Let them do their part. Let us do our part. That is what I believe we must seriously engage in. What I find on the other hand is a lot of people who come and say a lot about ancient Indian wisdom, but they have no idea of what it is. That comes up very clearly in the way it goes on. That does a counter marketing at the end of the day.
All right, sir. Yes. So first we'll have to believe in what we are doing. I think that's the essence of what you said. So one more question that was there, when we saw was at an institutional level, to integrate all of this wisdom, how can they have infrastructural requirements, or what is the training requirements? How at the institutional level do we have to address this?
Okay, very simple. I will take my example. I am a professor of management. I believe there is some interesting stuff available. In fact, institutions in this country till date have given enough of this freedom, given some broad parameters and so on, enough of freedom for us to innovate and bring. So about 10 years back, I said we should bring Bhagavad Gita, management principles from Bhagavad Gita. So all that I did was I did a very important assumption. I said the course outline that I write cannot be shot down by any stretch of imagination, because it should be at par with the course outline written on strategic management or financial engineering or whatever is my standard. That took 2 years for me to do a research to write a course outline. That commitment is if we do it, 70% problems are straight away solved. Now, if the material that you bring is so good, nothing can stop. I will tell you, 200 students take my Bhagavad Gita elective, but I stop them because how can I teach more than 200 students? And I can offer 3 times a day 70 students. Beyond that, I find it very difficult. So what I'm saying is, let us, each one of us, in our own strength, in our own conviction, we identify there is something interesting which can be brought out. Don't make any compromise. Do it in today's terms. Otherwise, you are not going to see the light at the end of the day. Bring it in today's terms. I have very nice session-wise reading material. I have cases where it is required. My evaluation patterns are exactly like what it would have happened in my strategic management course or whatever. Yet I am teaching, I am bringing about 200 shlokas from Bhagavad Gita and teach Sanskrit in the class. But it makes sense. So that homework, if we do, the system will, by and large, there are a few here and there which will happen. Let us not worry about all that. I think it is very much possible to bring them very nicely. We can, because they are so interesting at the end of the day. You don't have to do any kind of additional marketing. They are inherently sweet. I'll give you one example. In 2nd century BC, when a text was written called Chandar Shastra, Pingala wrote what is called Chandar Shastra. Chandar Shastra is all about meters, Anushtup, Trishtup, like that. So there he gave a nice formula, Yamata Rajabana Salagam. It is a simple formula, Yamata Rajabana Salagam. In fact, I took that Yamata Rajabana Salagam, and what I found was what is contained in that. In fact, he is the first binary mathematician of the world. He came with what is called binary cycle. There is one De Bruijn cycle in 1980. Some computer scientists in the West has come with De Bruijn, called De Bruijn cycle. That is actually De Bruijn cycle. You should be able to make that connection. That is, if we are able to make that investment and bring it, in fact, nobody can stop. People will say, give me more of that. In fact, when I was teaching in Chinmaya Vishwavidyapit, a little bit of ancient Indian wisdom is part of my work. I wanted to show them how to teach. When I taught them Kalpa Shastra, the material that I wanted for my, what is called Shulba Sutra. Shulba means thread. Shulba Sutra were all available in the Department of Mathematics in Canadian universities, and in, they teach what is called rope geometry. This is Shulba Sutra. Why can't we teach rope geometry here? Why can't our mathematics professors teach rope geometry? We are not able, because we have to invest. So we have to believe, we have to invest. This is an entrepreneurial venture for a teacher. Let us become entrepreneurs and then create value out of it for our satisfaction. This entrepreneurship is much better. It will feel satisfied.
Thank you so much, sir. So teachers and entrepreneurs, that's a very new concept that we are all listening. Thank you so much for inspiring us with that. Sir, one question from Central Sanskrit University, Guruvayur campus by Dr. Venugopal Rao. He says, Samskrita Kavyadinam Shikshana Sandarbhe NEP 2020 Samskrita Shikshakam Kimupadishyati.
No, Samskrita Sikshane NEP 2020 यदि वयं पश्यामः तत्र एतत् केवलम् आधुनिक विद्या ये शिक्षणं कुर्वन्तः तेषामेव इति कुत्रापि न निर्देशितम्. यदि संस्कृत अध्यापकाः इच्छन्ति, संस्कृत अध्यापकाः अपि संस्कृत माध्यमेन काव्यं भवतु अथवा वेदान्तदर्शनाः भवतु यत्किमपि भवतु, यत्किमपि ते शिक्षणं कुर्वन्ति तत्र NEP मध्ये यत् तत्र घोषितम् अस्ति तत्सर्वम् उपयुज्य कर्तुं यावत् अवकाशः आवश्यकं तावत् अस्ति एव. उदाहरणार्थं NEP मध्ये किं ते वदन्ति, एकस्मिन् एव विषये भवन्तः चर्चां न कुर्मः, छात्राणां भिन्नभिन्नविषयेषु तेषाम् आसक्तिः भवतु, भिन्नभिन्नविषयेषु तेषां ज्ञानं भवतु इत्यादि विषयाणि तत्र सम्यक् उपस्थापितानि सन्ति. तस्य नियुक्तुं तत्र अवकाशः अस्ति एव. किमर्थं नास्ति इति अस्माभिः चिन्तनीयम्. अत्र यदि गुरुवायूर् परिसरे तेषां तस्मिन् विषये किञ्चित् क्लेशः भवति, ततः समीपतरे एव चिन्मया विश्वविद्यापीठः अस्ति एर्नाकुळे, एकवारं तैः तत्र यदि गच्छन्ति ते तत्र गत्वा किञ्चित् चर्चां कुर्वन्तु इति अहं प्रार्थयितुम् इच्छामि.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. So collaboration is what you are speaking about, and collaboration to better understanding and better, so hopefully the message is taken by that. So one final question, sir. So how we have a lot of Indian knowledge systems like Yoga Sutras, Vastu Shastra, and you spoke about Ganita. Again, a lot of our faculty members and our academicians are asking us, how do we integrate it? Like, what are the steps that we need to take as academicians and management to blend that to modern curriculum?
Okay.
If it feels like...
Yeah. So I think a very fertile ground is mathematics to start with, because we need first experiment. Particularly, I'm talking about the school education. In fact, some of us are trying to do that experiment with about 30-40 people in Bengaluru. We are doing. What is happening is we found that if you take Karnataka State Board mathematics textbooks, so we are saying, let us not worry too much about what is written there. All that we need to do is, for every concept that is introduced there, can we identify the concepts which are available. In fact, what I find is the concepts that are available in the Indian system appear to be much simpler to articulate. Therefore, I think the best way for us to get these into an educational system is to create material. Because the advantage of creating a material is, one teacher, if he creates a nice textbook and a PPT or whatever, and run a capacity building workshop for 3 days, if 50 teachers attend it, 50 teachers have a material to fall back on. Of course, they should have the basic interest and Shraddha and believe that there are some interesting things which we can bring, which many of us have actually. We know that it is inherently very good. So can we create material? Can a group of chemistry people get together? Can a group of mathematics, can a group of civil engineers, can a group of, whatever different groups, can we create material and start. Lecture notes is the best way. Bring it, introduce it into the sessions and create a lecture notes, then slowly it will get into the system. Because if that support, we will be in a very easy way by which we can actually integrate. Otherwise, it is very hard actually.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. I think we are at 1 o'clock, so we'll end the session here now. Thank you very much for your insights. We are grateful to have you speaking on Disha Bharat platform. Over to you, Soumya ma'am, for the vote of thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for both the speakers. Gratitude makes sense of your past, brings peace for today, and creates a vision for tomorrow. Hope this is very apt because both the visionaries have given the clear-cut information and they shared the knowledge regarding NEP and its implication and adapting and adopting of a NEP 2020 from lower level education to higher education and what are all the structural changes we have to do through NEP. It's my privilege and a honor to render the oath of thanks. Honorable Chief Guest, respected August audience, it's given me immense pleasure to render oath of thanks for today's event. On behalf of Disha Bharat, I would like to thank Dr. Jagadeesh Kumar, Vice Chancellor, JNU University, for his meticulous talks on structure of higher education for NEP 2020. And thank you so much, sir, for sharing your knowledge and sharing your valuable ideas, where I'm very much inspired about great ideas need to do a lot of work to accept from all the stakeholders, where this will be really an inspiration quote for the day. Thank you so much. And Patanam, Mananam, Chintanam and Sankirtanam, it will be a restructure and the mantra for all our students and the faculty member. Thank you so much for your meticulous talk. And next, I would like to extend my heartfelt and humble thanks to Dr. Mahadevan, Professor, Indian Institute of Management, Bengaluru, for his insightful speech and contemplation towards ancient Indian education system or university. Sir has quoted, I have written 4 to 5 pages for both the resource person. It is the epitome of your specialization. We can see that we are expecting a guru like you to run or to take the NEP in every level. And sir has quoted the 3 things, that is think in a being, teaching method and deep state of inquiry. Whereas NEP today's session, both the resource person has spoken about innovation and the research. Research and innovation are the 2 sides of the same coin. As a higher education, we have to imbibe and we have to focus towards the research and education, and we'll make sure that Ya Vidya Sa Vimuktaye. As a faculty, as a student, we promise you that we will work and we will make our student, we will make our society to be a Vishwaguru Bharat in this context. And very much impressed and like to know about Shikshaka, Adhyapaka, Pradhyapaka, Upadhyaya, Mahopadhyaya, Deshikottam Acharya, finally Guru. Our Disha Bharat focus towards a prerana, a journey towards teacher from Guru, where it is focused on this particular content. And thank you so much, sir, for your meticulous and the insightful talk. Next, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to media people, NGO partner Youth for Saver, for your gracious support and make the event very successful. And it will be, I hope, your support will continue forever with Disha Bharat. And take this opportunity to say many, many thanks to all our well-wishers, management, college management or school management, principal, academician, all the stakeholders, finally all the stakeholders of NEP, from everybody, including non-living things also. I consider the stakeholder of NEP because we should know how to use the things better. So all the supporters and all the volunteers for your humble and the gracious present, and thank you so much for making this event grand success. And for a final quote, Disha Bharat is focusing towards a holistic development for sustainable India. In addition to that, definitely altogether we can make Bharata as a Vishwaguru. Of course, Bharata is a Vishwaguru, but only thing is we have to run, or we have to be in that particular path. And thank you so much. Till 2020-21 November, that is Disha Bharat, is going to conduct these kind of knowledge sharing session towards NEP 2020 and its implementation in all the dimension and all the points which is focused in NEP 2020. Hope your humble support will be continue forever. And thank you so much. Thank you for all the organizers and volunteers, especially today's resource persons. Thank you so much.